Right, guys, welcome back to the Computer Fitness Podcast. Today on the show, I have Mr. Lyle McDonald again. I also have Sumi Singh, who is has been training with Lyle, I think, since the dawn of time. So she has a ton of like amazing accomplishments in powerlifting. She also does personal training and whatnot. She holds lots of different Texas state records in two weight classes, the 48 kilo class and the 52 kilo class. In the Open and Masters across three different federations. She also is a model, and she's written books and done several videos. She's also, a mom, and so she helps out lots of other moms with their fitness goals. And y'all know who Lyle is, so I don't think I need to make an introduction on that. If you guys have followed Lyle on Instagram, his bio says you know who I am. I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
Yes. So thank you for that introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I want to ask, so I was always been curious, Sumi, how did you actually start working with Lyle?
So prior to moving to Austin, which is where I live now, I was living in Washington, D.C., and I was a personal trainer moving here with no clients, no business, no gym. And I knew Lyle, of course, through the forums, and I had all of his books. And so I just kind of emailed him out of the blue and said, hey, you don't know me. I'm a big fan of yours. But I'm coming to town and I know nobody. And I know that you know lots of people in the fitness industry. Can you introduce me to, some people who work at a gym who are looking to hire some new trainers? So I said, sure, no problem. Just, give me a call when you get here and I'll connect you with my two friends. And Lyle can take it from here. You can talk about your
yeah, so I have got actually two female powerlifters that I trained back in the day, and they had established her own training company, and so I hooked Sumi up with them and then totally forgot that she was showing up. So as it turned out, I was in the car with my friends as they were looking for a location to open a new gym, and their phone rings and they were like, it's Sumi Singh. And I'm like, oh God, that's this weekend. So it was just kind of a convenient thing. And I know that didn't work out as far as her working with them, but that was just like that. That was the first time she was coming to Austin. That was 2010. So I'd known her for years, professionally, and she can talk about her.
Right.
I mean, yeah, that was how we met, hilariously.
So we were friends for a very, very, very long time, which is why he knows me so well. Because I think people they might wonder why we have such an excellent rapport, and it's because I've known him for long. He's a very close friend of mine, helped me throughout my career as I was building my business here. He did all the videos and the photographs for my first book, Mom Strong. So he was very instrumental in all that. And when I was younger, he helped me diet down for a couple of fitness related, back in the day, prior to Instagram, everyone's a model now, but I did fitness modeling back then. So he helped me with a couple of my photo shoots.
Awesome. So I think that, it's always interesting, when you get started in a sport too. I always think it's interesting because Sumi, you have a great physique as well as you're incredibly strong. And I think that it's always interesting, seeing why some people might gravitate towards, either bodybuilding or powerlifting, because I'm assuming that, you're a rather competitive person, which is why you sort of sought out strength sport and why, the majority of your life has been being an athlete. What specifically sort of steered you a little bit more in the direction of, the actual competitive side of powerlifting? Because, you've done modeling, but, from my knowledge, you've never done an actual show.
Yep. So yes, I've always been very competitive. I competed in varsity track and field when I was in high school. So I actually did the throwing sports. I did shot put and discus. So I was definitely built for running, but I hated it so much that I was like, anything but running. And then when I graduated from college, I got my first job personal training in my early 20s. So I've always been in love with the iron, in love with strength training. It was just something I just gravitated towards naturally. And then for a very, very, very long time, I was just kind of interested in looking my best. So I did more of the bodybuilding style work, if that makes sense. Once I turned 40, I kind of got bored of doing fitness modeling. I got bored of just looking, training just to look good. There's nothing wrong with that, but I wanted to do something. I knew I was strong, especially in my upper body. So I wanted to do something, and powerlifting just seemed like a really cool sport. And I signed up with an online coach prior to meeting Lyle, and did two separate rounds with two online coaches. Signed up for my first meet when I turned 40, because that was my goal. And I didn't know what I was doing as far as having a handler at the meet or anything like that. And Lila's course, he was my friend, and at the time he was on crutches. He broke his foot, and he said, "I'll come and handle you. Don't worry about it." So he took it over from there, and he witnessed the tragedy. That was my first competition. I had fun, but he was just like, "Yeah, if you're gonna do the sport, I'm gonna take over." And then that's how he came in.
I know, Lyle, you've been really vocal about your lesson strategy for Sumi, where she doesn't really hit these like all out maxes in the gym. You guys go a little bit under actually what she can do. Do you want to like elaborate a little bit more on that? I know that you've talked about the Matt Geary book of handling, but I think that you have a little bit of a unique approach to how you handle Sumi.
Yeah, well, in terms of like, there's both the handling and the coaching, and the handling doesn't make a whole lot of sense without just a little bit of background, which is that so I'd known her for years before I started coaching her for powerlifting. So I kind of knew her levers and her biomechanics, which are frankly terrible for this sport. One of the first things I told her when she approached me is I said, "You make a great runner," and I stand by that. I also told her because of her long legs, and that she ends up very bent over squatting, and at the time she was doing kind of a weird high bar in flats.
It was high bar. Yeah, good morning
Yeah, it
squad.
was just a weird squat, and I'm like, look, if you're going to squat like that, you're going to need the low back strength of a gorilla because she was, basically good morning it. So when we approached it, knowing that she was not really built for reps, I basically we did all singles. And I know she likes training. She's got a huge work capacity. So on her squats, she's never done anything but singles. That's not true. Occasional doubles on chains early on. Deadlifts, I gravitated towards that because deadlifts, and I would read a couple of years later that Matt Geary was like, "Yeah, we only do singles and deadlifts." I'm like, "Oh, good. I guess I was, smart or something." And then bench, we would do a combination of doubles and singles. And because of that, using singles, I wanted to keep her at a higher relative intensity, right? Obviously, singles at 75% don't do anything. So I would keep her in, the 85, 90% range. And most of her volume was in assistance work because just the way she's built, we had a lot of weak points. It's kind of all weak points. So there's a lot of practice with heavy-ish singles. And I would distribute it. So she'd squat 3 times a week. She'd bench 3 times a week, right? Now realize anybody listening to this, we're talking about a lighter female. She competed in the 48 and 52 kilo class. That's 105, 114 pounds. Not lifting. I mean, she was deadlifting a lot, and that's where we made the biggest changes. Squatting 100 kilos, benching 87.5 kilos, right? Like a larger male would probably get wrecked by something like this. Like this frequency with this higher relative, it just would not work. And so we would do that, ton of assistance work. And then going into the meet, we would do strength cycles. So she'd do an SBD workout 6 times, shooting for PRs in the gym. Now, we also trained her above her normal body weight, and she would cut down to make weight. So I'm a very conservative coach. I believe in success building success. So when we go to meet, I would generally compete her underneath her best gym legs, right? And don't mishear me. I'm not saying this is the way to do it, the only way to do it. Lots of lifters will, hit a best triple and then go for it on meet day. That's not how I approached it with her. I want her to be able to go into the lifts going, look, you've already done this, right? This is just another day. And then my goal over long-term periodization was we build her meet maxes or training maxes up. Well, her meet maxes just march up with it. But it was a way to better guarantee her meet performance, and success builds on success. But then as far as at the meets, I did things very, very differently based on some things I picked up. The first 2 meets I took her to, she underperformed. And that's because I peaked her wrong and I competed her wrong. Very traditionally, didn't work. And I realized that she's the kind of lifter that if she doesn't stay in touch with heavy weights, she loses the feel for it. So if her final heavy squat is 10 days out and we go to meet, she just didn't look prepared. So going into her 3rd meet, which was her first time doing Mary Gainesmas, and that will come up again with RPS, I kept her heavy till 5 days out. Right, Monday, Tuesday were crushingly heavy, and then Thursday was meet prep, which was lighter. And then on Saturday, we would go in and number one, I would warm her up to above her first attempt because it was relatively so sub-maximal. So I could go to the platform and go, hey, you just did this. Like you did this 2 minutes ago. the other thing that's really unique about her, she recovers super fast. Like she can do a 90% squat and 90 seconds later, she's ready to go again. And what I actually found is that if we took too long between reps, she would cool off. So for her, 10 minutes between attempts was way too long. Like she would lose her groove, she would cool off. And so we went into that meet and I was like, okay. I tried to finish her final warm-up 2 minutes before her first attempt. Everyone, which was great because it gave us the warm-up room to ourselves, right? Like everyone else was ready 10 minutes beforehand. And we're just like, we wouldn't even start warming up till half the people were done, right? I'm just like, we're not, we got 15 minutes. So we're finishing our warm-ups, 2 minutes before first attempt. And then in between her attempts, we would go back to the warm-up room and I would have her do a medium heavy single, 3 or 4 minutes in, and a heavier single and maybe a heavy hold 2 minutes out. And then we go back to the warm-up room. So like there was, because like I said, otherwise she just cooled off too quickly. And it worked, right? We went to that third meet. She looked great. She looked, strong and comfortable under the barge. And I'm like, all right, we're just gonna have to do this for the next 8 years. And that's exactly what we did. Deadlifts were an exception, right? I couldn't warm her up to above her just because she got a lot on competition day. I would get her close enough and then we'd go. And we played around with it. Sometimes I took her back between attempts and did a groove rep, and sometimes I didn't. I don't think it mattered. Deadlift is such a grunty, especially the way she did it, non-technical lift. Like with squats for her and bench too. You know how this is. You go out and if you're just like, it feels heavy on your shoulders. And you're like, holy crap. This same thing with bench. You bring it out in your hands and go, oh my God, this feels so heavy to me. Deadlifts, there's none of that, right? It's you go grip it and rip it. So we would spend the meet running back and forth and back and forth. And it worked.
So Adam, you're a powerlifting coach as well. Do you have a lot of smaller females that you take to meet? Do you have somebody who's similar to me that kind of handles the weights the same way I do?
I've definitely worked with a few who are lighter, and in general, I've just found the frequency needs to be so much higher. Their average loading needs to be that much higher, and I think it's just because the actual recovery curves are just so much faster. Like Lyle said, your recovery is so fast. Whereas if I have somebody who is 100 kilo male, like one of my lifters just took a 300 kilo squat for opener today. Like I have to pull him back on a secondary days, especially, or he can't have that really heavy exposure because even like an RPE 5 single for Caleb is like 585 pounds. And that is so much weight.
Like the absolute low. That's why I kind of laugh at, like, I don't believe in high frequency powerlifting per se. It's appropriate for her. But then, Ray Williams, okay, dude is squatting 1,000 raw, or Jesus, the newest guy who did it. I guarantee you they aren't squatting 4 or 5 times a week. Because
once a week squatting.
Even 70%, just to put 700 pounds on your shoulders, even if it's relatively a lower percent, the absolute loading, you have to take that in. Again, Sumi is squatting 100 consistently, and 100 kilos, 225 pounds. It's like the recovery requirements just aren't there. And the physical, again, also especially for singles, it was heavy. We only got grindy towards the end. I was very careful about her fatigue management. I can presume, right? And I've known similarly a lot of lighter female lifters, and I think you found this. Low frequency not only doesn't work, it doesn't work at all for them, right? Like they just recover too quickly. They just don't, the type of training you frequently that works best for larger, stronger males just doesn't work for smaller females. Like I'm quite sure that, some of the female lifters who are pulling in excess of 600 pounds, I'm quite sure that they're training more traditionally. A smaller female who's pulling 365 pounds, it's just not the same. So I did, the things I did were very specific to her, on top of her forgetting how to do the movement very quickly. And if she wants to share the term that I tended to use for her in that regards, that I'll leave that to her. But she's the kind of lifter that squatting once a week would get her nowhere. Not on top of just recovering quickly, she would forget how to do the movement. Like, no joke, with more than 2 or 3 days off, she would just forget what she was doing.
Is there like much polarity and lightness? One of the things I do in my own coaching approaches, technically there's like terminology like, primary, secondary days, there's like priority. And if I have somebody who's really strong, typically I will actually cap their secondary days because if they push too hard, they're not going to be recovering enough from a neurological perspective. Whereas if somebody's a lot more beginner, I'm just going to say just push both of them. There's usually one of them's going to be low rep, one of them is going to be higher rep, and I kind of just tell them to keep going until there's like that interference that starts to happen. Or like, oh, I feel kind of like crap. Assuming because you only do singles, is there any sort of undulation in intensity of that, or is it more so where you distribute the accessory workload?
It's a little bit of both. So when I first started with her, like rank beginner, and part of the reason I picked that higher frequency is she needed a lot of practice because we had to rebuild her technique from scratch. And from a motor learning standpoint, eight singles plus warm-ups 3 times a week was going to be way better than doing, 24 reps in a workout and having her get tired. So, but when we started, I would give her a fixed weight for all 3 workouts in all 3 lifts. And I would give her one new technical thing to work on, and she would work on that. And when I felt like it was stable, I would give her something new to be bad at to try to keep building her technique from, we focus on the big picture stuff. And then over time, you work towards the details. And that worked for the first couple of years. So there wasn't any. And then I found that with each lift, it sort of ended up being a little bit different. The first place I saw her really start to break with that approach was deadlifts, because her deadlift was the heaviest and generally is, and she had a freak show deadlift. And going into, I don't know, her second, maybe third year, number one is 8 singles is way too many. Although what that happened, one workout, I want her to do a 9th squat rep for some reason, and she's like, I'll deal. Can I do 2 less deadlift reps? I'm like, fine. And we just kind of never went back. 6 was plenty when it got heavy. But doing the same heavy weight 3 times a week, I watched her started to break. I watched her technique start to fall out. And I actually canceled one of the workouts, one of the 2 times I did it. So that was the first lift that became a heavy, light, medium. So we had one crushingly heavy day where she'd work, 85 to 90%. And then the light day was like 85 to 90% of the heavy day. Not true speed work, but speedier in as much as she ever moved fast. And then the medium day was, 90% of the heavy day. So that's the first one that really went to intensity cycling. And frequently I would cut that. Like towards the end of the cycle, like Wednesday was her big pulling day. And if I could tell she was a little tired, I'd be like, fine, we're going to do 3 singles. Right? I'm like, we just needed to keep her groove. So I frequently would adjust that. Squats and bench, she was able to go heavier on all 3 days longer, but I did make that into 2 heavy days on both, and then a chain day in the middle, and that was just a work lockout. The rest of it, there was variation in her assistance work in terms of the workouts. Monday and Tuesday were crushers. Like they were monster workouts. So Monday, I'm going to describe this too, and you're going to go, you got to be kidding. So she would do warm-ups to 8 heavy singles on the squat. Then we do good mornings, 3x3, to 1 top set, right? We would pyramid up. Deadlifts, 6 heavy singles. Rack pull, 3x3, again, pyramiding to 1 top set. And I tried to keep that about 10% above her best deadlift. That was just give her that little bit of extra lockout. Then the rest of it was what I refer to as donkey work, which is just everything else. We used hack squats to build her squat from the depth. So we do 3x3 again. And then it was just hypertrophy work. So she would do like 6 more sets of 8 quads and 6 sets of hamstrings and 6 sets of glutes and some abs. So that was Monday, and it was a crusher, 2.5 hours. And then Tuesday was bench, 16 total reps, and then heavy dumbbell press 3x3, and then a lot of donkey work. It was weird. Bench, she never needed a lot of assistance work. It was very strange. And then Wednesday, she would do chain squat, light deadlifts, RDL 3x3, trap bar deadlift 3x3, and then we would do the donkey work. So that was a little bit lighter day. Thursday, chain bench, close grips, bodybuilding work. So that was a little bit lighter still. Friday, heavy squats, good mornings, medium deadlifts, no rack pulls, God forbid, and then bodybuilding work. And then Saturday was just heavy bench, pause dumbbell bench, and then donkey work. So it's like it did cycle a little bit through the week. Deadlifts again, heavy light medium, squats, heavy chains, bench, heavy chains. And then most of the heavy work was Monday, Tuesday. She was coming off a day off. Also, that had to be synced with her competition. right? A lot of people will do heavy squat Monday and heavy deadlift Friday or whatever. Well, for her, that didn't work, because if she didn't do a deadlift, heavy deadlift 5 days out, her deadlift would suffer. So I just had to crush her on that one workout. And again, that would kill a larger male. I mean, that would just be, can you imagine?
That would literally,
Right.
yeah, that would not work
That would
at
be
all.
inhuman. But this was for a smaller female with a fantastic work capacity, not lifting staggering absolute loads. And we built up to that over a number of years, who also had 17 years of previous training, right? Like for a beginner, I've got an older beginner female that I started with last year. Her training looks nothing. It looks similar to that, but it is 50% of the total workload because, and again, Sumi, her first 2 cycles, we did competition work and bodybuilding work. The end. There was no assistance work. There was nothing. It was just technical work and general all body strength. So this was an evolution over a number of years. And then once we got to that point, I just never changed it because they're really minor changes. So yeah, that was kind of the overall, and also realize she wasn't the training cycle. And I know you want to talk a little bit about periodization, then I'll shut up and let you ask the next question. Was like a 13-week cycle, which we would start submaximally. Like she would, well, her meet week was the easiest. She can tell you about that. That was the easiest workout because it was all submaximal relative. She'd lifted more in training, right? I'm a train at 100%, compete at 95% kind of guy, right? It's easy. Her meet was easy, comparatively speaking, to the training, because training was insanely heavy. The meet was, so like her meet week was her deload, believe it or not. And then we would start the next cycle, and I would start her competition stuff at like 85%. So she would get a couple of easy weeks, and then we'd build things back up, hit a new peak in the strength cycle, compete, do it again, light, yeah, easy. She only had one. Did you just see what your screen did?
That was awesome. I don't know why did I do that? Mix my hands? I don't know.
Celebration.
Yeah.
Backing up a bit,
Yeah.
he had said on Tuesdays, I don't need a lot of assistance work to the bench press, but he had just forgotten one bit that we also did have heavy floor presses, because that would improve my tricep lockout. Remember? There was that.
That was a big.
That's one. And then for me, I got a lot out of the pause dumbbell bench press, because he would hold that pause for a very, very long time. No, across all 3 repetitions.
And that was sort of what I was doing, right? So the squat days, it was mainly hack squat to build her rebound out of the bottom, and good mornings to get, her, because she would end up tipped over, and then her body, she'd hit this point and her body would just go boink, and she would just throw it, her body would just whip it back and finish with a good morning. And kept that again about 10% above her squat goals. And also that the heavy good mornings trained her to feel a heavy bar on it. Like when you got 265 for good mornings for a triple, 245 in the back squat doesn't feel scary. And then, but then the way I did bench is one day was to build, the general bench and lockout. That was the floor press we brought in a year or 2 ago for reasons. And then close grips was also, tricep strength. She's very much a tricep dominant bencher. And then the pause bench press was to build her start. So I kind of, for bench, I built it all one on each day. Squats, because her squat was relatively less strong. That's why I did 2 squat days. Her deadlift just kind of responded, but we did all the pulling on that one day. Like I said, it was deadlifts, RDL for her finish, trap bar deadlift for her start, and then,
I mean, the Monday workout almost took 3 hours, and that was with Lyle's help. Like if I had
that's me loading the plates. It would have taken her 4 hours by herself.
On my own, yes, it would have taken me that long, to change clothes too, because when you change from squat to your deadlift outfit,
right? She would have to change shoes and change gear, and just to get through the first 4 movements would be an hour plus, and then we would So it's but I mean, powerlifting, and that was with 2-minute rest between. Like if she was the typical power lifter and needed 10 minutes, oh my God, 80 minutes to get through squats rather than 25 it normally took. So
that's like,
I have no social life.
Because like technically, like I really, I think that most people would totally agree with like, Lyle's approach with, just doing tons of heavy singles. It's the most specific thing for, powerlifting. You can obviously scale up but back down. Most people would get more out of accessory work, in my opinion, as far as muscle growth and general work capacity and whatnot. But the issue is like time becomes a huge constraint for a lot of
Yes,
people.
very much so. You can get through, 3x3 a lot faster. And again, I do think, again, it's what is the athlete lifting? What, it wasn't Bulgarian. She wasn't maxing out every day because that doesn't work and that breaks people. That was the
Yeah.
strength. And that was only once a week for 6 weeks to learn how to express that single. But I think a lot of it also depends on biomechanics. I have two good friends that powerlifted for years, and they had sort of they tried everything. And the way they put it was, the more well-built you are for a given lift, the less accessory work you need. And I think there's much truth. People that are built for benching can just bench and then do Ed Cohn, who's probably built about as well for all three as anything. He did the most simple assistance work you've ever seen, right? He didn't do what most people do. He just did, whatever. He'd squat and he'd do leg extensions and leg curls. Like, he didn't do any of that other stuff. Sumi isn't built well for anything. Yeah, I mean, like, that's not me being mean. It's just me being honest. Like, her biomechanics.
I agree.
So for her, it was a case of like, I knew if we tried to do even sets of 5 in the squat, when you're that bent over, I mean, you know what it's like. Your low back gives out. You're not getting quality work. And I would have had to.
Adam is quite tall. I mean, Adam, looking at your videos, you look like you've got a lot of femur going on too. You look.
Yeah.
So,
I've got to make several changes to my technique to like make getting depth easier. I don't have the shoulder mobility to squat low bar, so I do like more of a medium bar. And so the way I get around that with a lot of my lifters is for like the leverages is I lower down their average intensity on that lift. So like for me, like I do not train average intensity very high. I usually have a couple of heavy sets per week. Usually those heavy sets are on my heaviest day of the week, and everything else, like Lyle said, is donkey work.
Yep. And I think a lot of that also, there is a gender difference. Men are good at intensity and tend to be pretty poor at volume, generally speaking, right? Women tend to be less good at intensity. I've talked to many coaches who are like, yeah, women, it takes a while for them to be able to express a true max, but are great at volume. So I think some of the traditional programs, again, we're not talking about the 600-pound, female deadlifters. We're not talking about those that are getting to those levels that women may need to work at a relatively higher intensity. Another thing that gets often forgotten between men and women has to do with women's muscular distribution. Women typically, Sumi is an exception to this, are typically more lower body dominant and less upper body dominant. So what you see in both the squat, less so, but the bench and also the deadlift, they're limited by what their upper body can handle. Men tend to be a little bit more even. And I think that also feeds into a lot of this, right? Like if I'd had her doing 5s, even if her legs could have moved it, for the upper back is the upper body is what will give out. Now, again, she's kind of the reversed case, which is why she had a good squat for her biomechanics and an absurd bench and deadlift. Because if you watch her deadlift, she basically got 0 leg drive. She just did a round back stiff-legged deadlift off the floor. And if it got to her niche, her rack pull would finish it. It's atypical. I wouldn't teach it to anybody. It's actually very similar if you watch Lamar Gant. It's very much what he did. And it's not unheard of, but I wouldn't say it's common. And I tried to make her into a conventional deadlifter, and that wasn't going to work. Her body won't use leg drive, and I gave up trying.
And I also have a crazy absurd, and in addition to the upper body just being like the way it is, I have for the grip strength that I have, it makes no sense. Like I have super tiny hands, like toddler sized hands. Literally my daughter, when she was 11 years old, had bigger hands than me. I mean, so my grip is just crazy strong for no reason. We don't know why.
I never figured out why her grip didn't fail as she was deadlifting.
On deadlift, especially.
425 by 3, and she found that straps made it harder because it would make it was the thickness would make it
harder. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
It was actually, her grip was stronger without straps than with for a lot of movements. It was bizarre. So it's just like a lot of these things were very unique to her. But yeah, it's interesting to me, and I certainly won't. You and I could talk about this at a later day. But like I've watched the powerlifting trends over decades, from the early periodization stuff when people did 10, 5, 3, 1. Cohn, who did that initially and kept getting hurt, so he kept his competition work to 5s and less because you found that he didn't get hurt as often doing it that way. And it's more. Then we had Westside. It was all maxes all the time, and that broke everybody. And like now, it seems like the real trends in powerlifting is you do a little bit of top end work, a little bit of 90% work kind of year round. Because what everybody found back in the day is if you do lots of tens, you lose your top end, right? Even if you did a maximum set of 10 in the squat, which I wouldn't recommend, the final rep is still not the same as a heavy single. It doesn't move the same. The biomechanics aren't the same. The kinematics aren't the same. The kinetics aren't the same. So it's and like Matt Gary, from what I understand, he does mostly sets of 1 to 3 of the competition work. Singles only on deadlifts because that makes sense. And again, I'm not saying this is people did great doing sets of 5s and triples and like in all that, but it seems like the trends are a little bit of 90% work just to keep in touch with that. And then some volume work. And then, again, if you're perfectly built, you maybe do 80% competition work and 20% assistance work. But like even when Louis came to the forefront, it was like, yeah, Westside's really superior because it fixes weak points. And I was just like, did weak point training was that not a thing? I mean, I guess in the 2000s, there was a brief period where it was all specificity. Corte 3x3 and like just do the competition lifts and Pavel and strength is a skill, which it is, but like that doesn't fix weak points. You have a weak lockout. I've never seen benching only fix it ever.
Yeah.
You do lockout work, you do some tricep work, and you do the bench work to put it all together. And I just took hers to a more extreme version of that.
Yeah, what I found with like most powerlifting programs like right now is like they will typically undulate between different rep schemes. I will say there's some interesting things I was telling my athletes who like one of my clients, Austin, oddly enough, he does not respond well to singles. So what we do is we'll do like in his accumulation blocks, we'll just do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, keep the down sets the exact same. And now that we're in a peak, either do a fatigue single or do a single after a set of 3. And he just responds better to that. But typically as a powerlifter, I think it's more just like that 90% like relative intensity instead of like the absolute intensity, because like for some people keeping 90% on like a single is hard. Like for myself, I can't really do that. Like I can do like a triple and a double and then a single and progress pretty well with that. And I think it also has to do with like, I'm a, taller dude who's relatively strong, whereas if it's like absolute loading, but if you have somebody who is a little bit weaker or they, lighter or less muscular, the damage from that is less and they can just recover better from it. And usually we'll see lots of these lightweight girls, they keep singles in all the time. One of the most popular strategies is that cheek singles approach that I mentioned, where like coaches will literally just do singles year round. It's around 90%, like what you said, 85, 90, 90%. Once they start peaking, that's the priority, and it's 95%. That's where they live.
Like I said, I think I think you've got that. You've got gender stuff. You've got individual stuff. But smaller females, like I said, they can do reps all day long, right? Like it's so funny. Like if you give me just the average male and female trainee, and I make him do like a heavy set of 10 squats at the same relative intensity, the guy will have to go lay down for 10 minutes, and 30 seconds later, the female trainee be like, "I'm ready." Yep. There's so much difference just in recovery, in stress. And like I said, I don't think whether it's neurologically, psychologically, I don't know. I think women often need a little bit, not only can handle a higher relative intensity, but may need it just to stay in touch. For them, just doing lots of 5s may not, or at least doing a mixture. I know that's a very popular way is, you work up to a heavier single and then you drop back and do some volume. You do 2x2 or 3x3 to get the work in. Except with her, I just took it to the end extreme of all singles. And then most, the grand majority, I mean, she did 24 squats a week in terms of actual work reps. That was it. Which, you could do 5x5 once a week. And probably 90% of her volume was assistance and donkey work, just the hypertrophy and the general strengthening stuff. And I'll only add, then I'll let her talk or let you talk, ask another question. You look at the way the Chinese Olympic lifters train, that's exactly what they do. They keep in heavy snatch, clean and jerk most of the time because they got to practice that skill. Because Olympic lifting especially, the way 85% moves and the way 100% moves they might as well be different levels. Biomechanically, speed, all that stuff. So they do a lot of that. They pick an assistance exercise. They fix weak points for a couple of weeks, and they do a ton of bodybuilding work because a bigger muscle is potentially a stronger muscle. Jeremy Lenick be damned. So anyway, hers is at the extreme. Yours, what you described, is more of a middle ground. And then it sounds like what you're doing with your lifters is more of a mixture, depending on the person. Works for me.
Absolutely. And so I think one thing I wanted to go into, Sumi, is like, your mindset in regards to, competition, your training, because I think this is something that is sort of not talked about a lot, because I think, number one, every single person takes it a little bit differently. But I think that the main reason, like, why people, keep training is their mindset, and how that changes over time. We already talked a little bit about, like, what got you into that, but like, what pushes you to go through those 3-hour death grinding, SBD days? What pushes you to step on the platform? Like,
Yeah.
why do you do that?
I mean, so first of all, I never knew I was going to be ending up with 3-hour-long workouts. Had I known that, no, I'm just kidding. I think obviously because I had such a long and strong background already in the strength sports, it was a very easy transition. But yeah, you're right. Competing is something that is very different. I am very much a goal-oriented person, and I'm also the kind of person who likes the process. And I think that's key if you're going to pick a really challenging goal with the outcome, which is many months away, like with powerlifting competition. And especially if you intend to compete, for a long time, like this isn't just a fly-by-night thing. I competed with Lyle for 8 years. I think the key to longevity is to really enjoy every bit of the process, because I mean, you can never control what the outcome is. You don't know what's going to happen on meet day. You don't know who's going to show up, and you can put in, 100% effort in your training the whole time, and something might happen on meet day. And if that, inevitably something always does, where you learn something. So we can be as perfect as we can be and do everything perfectly, and we learn something new on meet day. And you have to take those lessons as, not as failures, but as something that you can work on and improve on. And Lyle started off saying that he always gave me something to be bad at. So very early on, I learned that there's a lot for me to learn, but I'm still capable of learning. So I think step one is you fall in love with the process. You have to really accept that you may be having to work on the basics. So, and there might be a difference between, I don't know if you've seen it, but in working with your male and female lifters, that, women are a bit more patient, or can be a bit more patient, and have less of an ego-driven, I guess, drive to achieve their goals. And I think if you're able to keep your ego in check, that's really key.
100%. I think one thing too is like, understanding, especially as you get into strength sport, like you're gonna have big fluctuations in strength, like at the beginning of like a macro cycle or training cycle, and then you'll go like way up higher. You're also gonna have periods of like regression, or where things are stalled out, and I think that's one of the hardest things for powerlifters, especially like right now, because for social media, we're surrounded by seemingly thinking that progress is linear. And I'm going to be the first person to say, like, I haven't been strong for like 3 months, and now I'm just starting to get strong again. And that's tough to deal with.
It is. And I think that we forget that for any long-term goal, we have to accept that obstacles are just going to be part of the process. If you go into this thinking, I cannot fail, that sort of macho mentality, like there is no room for failure, that's not going to serve you well. So I think you have to accept that failure is going to happen, but we'll always learn from it. And I think that's key to making it as a long-term sport like this.
And from my end, right, because I'll be honest, as a coach, I'm not a big sports psychology guy. The mental stuff was never my strength. The only thing I tried to do, and it's funny, she's making it sound like she was always process driven, and that was not the case. It took a couple of years. Initially, she was a little bit of a bro. And she would get frustrated where her technique would be unstable. And this technique, especially, you get better and then you backslide, and you learn something and then you lose it, and then it comes back, and her strength was a little bit more, just to your point, fluctuating. And she'd be very annoyed. She's just like, but I lifted this Monday, and why can't I do it? She expected to be 100% every day. And early on, that especially wasn't the case. But it took me a little while to get her to really understand, look, if you put in this process, the results will come at competition and in the strength cycle. But a great deal of that, sorry, I should know, when I say strength cycle, her peaking block going into the meet for the final 5 or 6 weeks, we would drop out the Friday, Saturday workout, the normal ones, and Saturday would be a squat, bench, deadlift workout. We would do squat, bench, deadlift in order, competition standards, full commands, in her singlet, I would start her at 90%, and the goal was over that period of time to hit new training PRs. And that's what would lead it. So that's when I say strength cycle, that's what I mean. And it'd be the same thing. She did a giant PR on workout 3, and then it wouldn't quite be there on workout 4. I mean, she'd never be more than, but it took her a while to really realize that the process, if she just put in the work and just did what I told her without arguing with me, and that was, which she did. Like she was the perfect athlete. She would just do what I told her. And until there were issues, there was a problem, we would always address that as a team. But my goal was to engender that idea. She had to see success, because success builds success. I don't like missed reps in training. They happen, right? Especially when you're doing near maximum singles.
Yeah.
Things happen. Bar gets misgrooved, whatever. But my goal in general, if she had in any given training cycle of 13 weeks, over however many god awful number of reps, if she had 5 total missed reps, that was a lot.
But that's very important, the way he trained me early on, where even though it was, super basic training and, a lot lighter, it's very important early on to see so much consistent success, so that you feel good about yourself. You feel like, I can do this, and he was conservative in his meet attempts, or, from the outside, it might look like that, because he wanted me to get good at the skill of competing. Because if competition is hard, it's very stressful, as you know. And so, but if every meet you keep going, wow, I can do this, of course you're going to keep on going. And that's thanks to him and the way he planned my competition.
Right. And that's like, it's the whole success builds success thing, building self-efficacy, which, and again, people listening to this, like, I know a lot of people go to meet, they go for it because they either want to or they have to, and they're okay with especially early on with new lifters, with the other master's lifter. I took Sumi's daughter to a couple meets. It's critical to go 9 for 9. That first meet, you have to have a successful meet, because if you don't, you're going to quit, by and large. Some people get frustrated, but in the beginning level, everything has to be success. So when I would give her technical feedback, I'd give her one basic thing to work on. They didn't care about the rest, right? You see so many people when they try to build technique, they're trying to figure out 8 things at once. It's like, no, big picture stuff. Wait till that's successful. And honestly, part of that was my coach was brilliant at it at speed skating. He would wait till I thought I was getting it down, and he'd be like, here's something new for you to be bad at. And it's not meant to be discouraging. It's meant to keep the lifter on the high point of the learning curve, right? This is 80%. Now we're going to bring in something, the next piece of it, and the next piece of it, to keep building your technique towards and there'll be backslides, and we have to fix stuff and all that other stuff. But it had to be successful. I had to give her, and if I'm all partially honest, a lot of that was from training dogs at the dog shelter. When you're trying to teach a dog a new trick, you have to give it something it can succeed at. Because if you're asking for too much, it gets frustrated and quits. And people, children, athletes are no different. You have to give it something that they can succeed at.
Something specific to powerlifting and powerlifting competitions. You compete with the USPA, I think, right? I mean, they are such a welcoming organization. Like, I know on my first meet, I did not go 9 for 9. And that's because I flubbed up on a lot of stuff. Like I flubbed a couple of commands, and we all do. And I remember not just the competitors who were with me going, it's okay, don't worry. And they were super supportive. Like, we all did it. We all did it. And I just thought that everybody in the powerlifting community, from the judges to the meet directors to the spotters, everybody was just super supportive. And so, I don't know, for me, if that was my first kind of formative experience in powerlifting, even though I made mistakes, everybody around me is so supportive, and so why would I not keep going?
Yeah.
Something that's unique about powerlifting is that, like, it's just kind of like that. Like, like on my meet, like, that's going on, like, like, I'm going to be going against, like, my friend Justin, and like, we're probably going to be going for, like, similar level deadlifts and similar squat. And like, I'm just like, bring it on. It's not like, screw this person. I think also, like, liking competition, like liking like sometimes, like, the pressure of that is super, super important, because like, I've always been a show off since I was like a little kid. That's why I'm good at like the social media thing and whatever. And like, and people are like watching me. I'm like, sweet, like, I'm going to do better now.
Yeah. That's great.
I think one other thing too about like Lyle, with like the whole technique thing, that's something that always grinds my gears, that people will say, like along with my clients, I'll like, look at my squat. I'm like, do one thing. They're like, what else? I'm like, nope, one thing. And then we'll see how that changes things. And then if you suck at something else, I'm going to tell you something else to
Yeah.
fix. And if you think about, we're certain background about what Lyle said about the assistance work. Lyle probably saw certain things in Sumi's kinetic chain that were breaking down. And so he said, this is what your weaknesses are. Let's expose her to that, which what she sucks at, make it suck less. So then the actual lift gets better.
Well, and that both in the short and the long term, that's what you have to do. Like in training, it's like, all right, look, you are going to get tipped over in your squat. I mean, she toiled. We got her as upright as she was ever going to be by getting a heeled Olympic shoe, getting an extra heel put on that. We did play with stance a little bit, and finally just nothing like, believe it or not, a narrower stance just worked better for her. And I finally quit messing with it after 5 or 6 years. But I'm like, but the reality is, because of your biomechanics, you're going to be tipped over. I have to give you the low back strength so that if you get out of position, this is going to happen. On bench, if I know this is going to happen, I have to fix this. Or deadlift especially, because it was so round backed, and a lot of people are like, isn't that unsafe? It's like, well, I wouldn't teach this, but we did a metric ton of low back work from the get-go over a long period of time to make sure her low back was bulletproof.
Yeah, I mean, and outside of training for years, I used for years and years, I used a weighted vest, and that helped build so much. I mean, I would use it when I was doing stuff around the house.
Right.
So, you know,
general
tremendous lower back endurance I got for years of doing that.
And that's something that often gets forgotten. People have asked me, because like with low back extension, we didn't push the weight, we just got the reps. They're like, but why? I'm like, it's great when a deadlift moves quickly, but on that 4th attempt, when it takes you 8 seconds to get to the top, if you don't have that, low back strength is great. If you don't have the spinal erector endurance and the upper back endurance, that's what's going to give out. It was very important to do that. And also there was just a gradual progression. But regardless of that, so that was short term. But even with competitions, we would go and it would go perfectly sometimes, and it would go less than perfectly for whatever reason. And this is the mental stuff, you have to really like appreciate the successes, right? You can be happy, but that doesn't mean you're satisfied. You can always want more. But also is, okay, this happened. Something went wrong, whether it was during warm-ups or we had some depth issues at one point, and she had some depth issues at one point. We had an issue with ramping on deadlifts at one point. Okay, why is this happening? You could take the stance of, either woe is me or, play the, it was a crappy call. It's like, look, I'd be lying if I said I agreed with every call, but the judge's call is the judge's call, period, right? It is, if this is the situation, this is what we're going to change. And we're going to make sure, like with the squat depth thing. After that, we went back and I said, look, you know as well as I do, some lifters can skirt depth, just there.
It's harder with leg gear. It's so much harder.
She didn't have that skill. She didn't have that skill, and she was never going to. It has to be so perfect. And I'm like, look, we just started having her full squat. I go, we are going to make it, and this is something I heard Matt Gary say, take it out of the judge's hand. Don't even make it a question on depth.
Yep. Right? I mean, so other lifters who have I'm very leggy. So other lifters who might have thick hamstrings and thick calves can get a nice bounce out of the bottom of the squat. I'm air. Like when I squat, it's just twigs. So I got to really get down there.
Right. So, but that was, so in the long term, it's like, okay, what can we learn from this meet to improve going forwards? And that's how you continue progressing, at least until you finally hit that wall. But going back again to the positives thing, whether it's technique or whatever, you have to, powerlifting is such an amazing community. Because even in competition, you go and you know what? They're my best friend. I trained with them in the gym. Today, they are my enemy. I am here to destroy them. But if they are the stronger or the better lifter on the day, I will still applaud them. Because all it means, it doesn't mean they're, I'm a lesser person. There is a competitive but still supportive component of it that I've seen in the occasional sports, but not many. You don't generally get, lifters looking down on some, like especially with beginners, right? You'd see beginner youth, beginner women, masters women show up and like, okay, they're only squatting whatever, 50 kilos. It didn't matter. They get just as much support. They just get it. It doesn't matter that you showed up. Whether you're squatting 100 or 1,000, you will get the exact same support At least again, there are hard heads, I'm sure, in some federations as well. But in USPA, everyone is supportive. Everyone helps. I
I mean,
tried to help
technically,
other
it's
lifters.
powerlifting. It's very much you against you, especially if you're.
Yeah, I mean, you can be head to head, make no mistake. There are cases where she would be up against another lifter for a record, and I would be playing, that's my job. I'd be playing a lot of strategy, like, okay, how can I, but if they made a lift and you didn't, or vice versa, it's like, well, they were better today. I'll be better next time. And
Right.
I had a buddy who was a downhill skier, and he said it was the same way. On the hill, you tried to destroy your opponent, and when it was all over, you went to the hot tub and drank with each other. And powerlifting is very much like that, and that's, I love it for that reason.
I think that environment in general, like, I think like a big thing with my coaching is I have like a community of all my clients together, and it's really important for them to have like that positive like support and other people that are going through things, and having like that positive environment. One of the things I always try to remind my clients, like one of my clients who's very neurotic, was kind of freaking out about like, what should I take next week on my squats, and like I could tell he's stressed out about this, and I've known him for a long time, and I'm like, hey, less stress, more gains. Just,
yeah,
you're strong. Just go and execute on the day. Like, don't worry about it. Like, I had a really shitty week of training last week. I was telling Sumi, like, I might pull out of this meet, and I realized that's kind of stupid. Like, one bad week of training doesn't mean anything. I know I'm significantly stronger on week 3 because strength fluctuates throughout a training block, and I crushed it. And I was like, oh, well, but I also had a very good support community with my coach, my friends, etc., saying like, no, like, you can do this. I think that's a huge part of the whole mindset thing is like, because if you have a really hard session, you had like, you had a really grindy, it wasn't supposed to be grindy. Well, you can reframe that and say, oh, at least I didn't fail it. At least I got that. At least I got some training stimulus in. And I had a really good podcast with David Wilson too, like in regards to like, everybody talks about mythical singles at RP10 being so fatiguing. He's like, I don't think they're that fatiguing. I feel like it's everything in your training program, everything in your life, your nutrition, everything like that contributes to that fatigue. It's not just like one input. Because I could come in every single day and max, and I would feel fine.
But I learned over the many years that your feelings aren't always right. You can maybe even have a shitty day of sleep and a poor day of eating or whatever you want to call it. And so you go and think, oh, this is going to suck. If you have that mentality, like just because you didn't XYZ, get in a proper meal or sleep properly, you might go into training and all of a sudden you're fine. It's just like hard training is hard training. And at some point, like, especially if you're competing at a high level, like you are, and how I was, like the majority of your work is just going to be hard. So you better like it,
And there were times during the strength cycle where like, whatever, she'd come in and things just weren't clicking and it wouldn't go well. And I'd say, look, trust me, I can see it. And then the next week she'd come back and she'd hit a huge PR. I go, this is just how adaptation goes sometimes. Yep. But once that happened often enough, she finally realized that those individual days don't really matter. Now, yeah, like if I saw things starting to, consistently fall off, like when I started to break her with her deadlifts in year 3, that's when I get concerned. But people, oh, I had a bad workout. Am I overtrained? Should I do this? Should I do that? Like, no, you should relax because it doesn't mean anything.
And that's why, like, I know you're a coach too, Adam. So you were talking about your client earlier who was stressing or being neurotic. Is like, what I tend to do is if I'm stressed out like that, I'll be like, I'm just going to pass my stress on to the coach. You worry about it. I'm going to do my job in the gym.
Right. That is the role of the coach. The role of the coach is to take like data from the trainer, from the lifter, say, hey, I feel like this. And the coach says, this is cap or not.
Well, yeah. And I mean, she and I, we would occasionally, that's where we would butt heads. I would see something and I'd be like, we need to cut this. And she's like, I don't want to. And I'm like, this is not a democracy. And it's certainly not a cheerocracy. You don't get an opinion. Like, not always, but I tend to be a little bit of an autocratic coach. She didn't get an opinion until year 2 or 3. She didn't know the sport. But I'll be honest, when I was speed skating, I didn't get an opinion either until I knew the sport. I'm like, yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years. My coach has been doing this for 30. Who the hell am I to think I know better than him? And so, but that was also a lot of the way that I coached her and also handled her. Her job was to do one thing, which was lift. It was not to think. It was not to worry. She never knew when we went to meet. And again, this is not right for everyone. and this also depends on how people don't, not everybody coaches like this. At meet, she didn't know her attempts. She didn't know it was on the bar. Even in the gym, she only knew what was on the bar when it was very easy to tell visually, because she can't do plate math any better than I can. And it was better with kilos because neither of us knew what was on the bar. I mean, like, quite honestly. And I just only want to put this out there that this kilo stuff, it's called the United States Powerlifting Association. Damn it, use pounds. I don't think in kilograms. Anyway, so we go to meet, and like her job on that day, especially, was to lift the thing 9 times or 12, and that's it. She didn't think, she didn't focus. I handled everything from start to finish in terms of telling her when to take her caffeine pre-lift, when to get dressed out, when to go to the bathroom, when to wrap, when to belt, when to chalk, where to go, where to be, what to do. And even there, and again, this is the way she and I approached it. One thing that I've seen, getting back to technique, and then we should move on to another topic. I know you want to talk about body fat and step count. We don't want to go too long. Is I see a lot of coaches or well-meaning people. People are getting ready to go up on the platform, and they're like, all right, heels, big chest, get tight, head up, stay strong. And
too many cues.
At best, most lifters can think of one thing. Some can't think of any. Sumi is not able to keep even during training. I never cued her before a rep. I gave her feedback afterwards, because if I cued her, she'd be thinking. I wanted her lifting. And our goal over the 8 years was to turn her into a robot on the platform. That the final thing I would tell her was execute. I never cued her. I never told her anything, because you fix that shit in training. And if there's an even the tiniest issue, you fix it in warm up. You do not fix stuff on the platform, by and large. Every once in a while at a meet, we'd have to make a little one meet. She was hitting the uprights on something. And we're like, all right, we got to go back to the warm-up room. You got to learn to take another step back. But that was so late in her career, it wasn't like we were adjusting things. Once we went to a meet and they had a monolift and a thicker bar, I'm like, all right, we need to practice this because we've never used this kind of bar. But it was never more than, so I tell her execute. And that was meant to run the program that we had practiced identically for rep after rep after rep after rep in training. If you're going to cue, whatever, if you give them the one important one, you know they don't stay, like you find the one cue, and this is your job as a coach, the one cue that puts everything together. You don't focus on minutia to keep their first rib angle, just or whatever it is, right? You don't cue them 3-point foot, like whatever it is, whatever. Yeah. It's not a detail. You give them the one cue that will put the rest of it together, assuming they need it at all. But you don't give them the six.
That's also important for the athlete too. Like, not just like, I mean, he said just one word, execute, and I would run the program. But in my head, my mindset is very positive. So for squats, I might just be thinking one thing, strong or whatever. Like you pick a word. Sure.
But it was never
before you lift, rather than telling yourself, okay, I got to make sure that I take my deep breaths. I got to make sure that, I squat down to this level, like I got to make sure I throw the weight back. Like who does that? Like that would ruin me if I had to do so many things.
I did.
I'm actually lifting.
I did, but I was thinking
strong or something, or if it's deadlift, like just rip it off the floor. One cue.
Right.
Well, and the other thing
going to have a conversation with myself.
Yeah. And then the other thing going to coaching that and then we will move on, was part of that was the way I competed her, because we were going relatively below her limits for the grand majority of her competition. As right before her lift, I could go, look, you've done this 87 times and you did it 4 times on Monday. You don't have to worry. You're just like, this is just another rep in the day. This is just another thing. But a point that a good buddy of mine made said, and this is where the coach-athlete relationship comes in, and that's a whole separate thing. And you and I can do a separate podcast about this, because now you want to talk about her career and her experience, is by getting her constant success. What he put it, he goes, she learned to trust your attempts. She knew walking to the platform that I was, almost never going to give her something that A, she'd never lifted before, that B, I wasn't eminently confident that she could lift, because she experienced that meet after meet after meet. When all you see is success, when you see 8 out of 9 or 9 out of 9 or 12 out of 12 or whatever it is, going into the next meet, all she can be thinking is, I trust my coach to make the right attempts. because he's done it before. Whereas, so, and again, I'm not trying to criticize anybody or saying I've got the keys to the kingdom. This is how I do it, right? I've been at meets and the lifter has to make a 20 kilo PR and the coach will throw it on there, or the athlete will be like, I want to go for it. And again, there are places to do that. Read Matt Gary's excellent book. But she never had to fear stepping up to the platform, that I was going to put something on there that I didn't have supreme confidence that she could make. So all she had to think was strong, execute, and run the program. And that's what she did.
Yeah, I think last point I'll make about this one. My favorite quote, there's two things. Stevie Cohen says, if before you walk on the platform, there's any doubt in your mind about your ability to lift that weight, you've already lost.
Oh
You
yeah.
have to have 100% full confidence. And I think especially like if you get really good at gauging your training, like I know 100% of the time what I have. If I'm using my ego though, I might call a little bit extra. And like going off of Lyle's like point, like I don't RP10 ever anything. Like I won bench last time, but that was because I cut like 14 pounds. But I usually go like 2.5 kilos below what I think I can do. Because that guarantees I know I can get it. And one last thing is reminding my athletes and myself, like, this is a third attempt. It's supposed to feel heavy, dumbass. It's supposed to feel heavy. Like, don't freak out with that. That feels heavy. That's the sport. That's why you're here.
And that's also why I think you do need some practice with heavier weights, because it moves differently. I trained someone years ago, and this is Olympic lifting. And when it got heavier and she felt like it was moving more slowly, she would decide that she couldn't make it. And as soon as you make that decision, that's what happens, right? She wouldn't even go for it. Whereas if you're currently, that's why I approached it. And I know that, pseudo Bulgarian, that was the Bulgarian Olympic lifting approach, is once you've done a world record in training, you just go to meet and do that. I had somebody get in my face very early online about this. And I was talking about them. This is before like Sumi's second or third meet with me. And she was just like, so what's her best triple? And I go, well, we don't do triples. She goes, well, where do you go from there at meet? I go, she goes and does the exact same damn thing she's done in the gym every day for the last 13 weeks. That's where you go from there. Again, I know some people, and again, these are heavier male lifters, right? Ray Williams is not going to try 1,000 in the gym to see if he can do it. That's not going to work because he's probably I'd love to know what he does. Many lifters can predict their single off their best triple. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying that for her and for some lifters, again, lighter, smaller, etc., like it has to be heavy enough so that they don't freak out. So anyway, I think we've sort of buried that, and that's the coach-athlete relationship that's developing and people would comment on that. They would come up and be like, y'all haven't said 12 words to each other today. I would just bark commands at her during events. Wrap, execute, chalk, go to the platform. Like that was it. We didn't talk.
Not at all.
Between events. But
that's how I operate on my own meet day. Like, always my talk because like I have people want to talk to me. Like it was in my situation. Like, like if I'm like before my deadlift, like my brother is trying to talk to me. Like my clients are, I'm just like looking at them like, can you not? Like I'm trying to like focus.
Yep, exactly. And we would talk in between events about what happened or just go chat so she could relax. But I had trained her for every day in the gym for years and years and years. I knew exactly what she needed. She knew exactly what to expect from me. And, I knew her like truly, literally inside and out at that point. And so that's how we did it. She's not a rah-rah. She didn't need hype. She got the execute command and she went and did it. And again, some lifters need that. But as a coach also, that's about knowing your lifter. Anyway, let's move on. I know you wanted 100%. To ask about
I actually do have a heart out right now. So maybe we can schedule this later. But I do have on this. I have like something that I have to get to. But I want to thank you for coming on, obviously, and donating your time. I think this is like a lot of really good like conference topics regardless, as always. If people want to follow you, Sumi, or if you even want them to, like, where should they go, or maybe hire you for your services?
So my personal training business is named after my daughters, and it's Shyla is her name, and that's it means the goddess of strength and confidence, which is why I thought it'd be a nice name for a personal training business. But that would be at Shyla Fitness on Instagram. And then I'm at shylafitness.com, and that's SHAILA, and then the word fitness.com.
Cool. Then Lyle, I will include your information
my stuff's
as
the same.
always. So thank you
All
guys
right.
for listening, and I'll
Thank
talk to
you,
you guys
Adam.
in the next one.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you,
Adam.
Adam. Bye.